as you guys are realizing, is changing in terms of how emerging brands are working. And right now, we're actually in the process of publishing a white paper that is all about the state of the emerging designer and emerging market. And the idea around it is really, and you guys know this is really a rare opportunity, right? Like what we're in the middle of economically in terms of being able to have access to opportunities to publish, to get in front of the consumer. The barriers to start a business is really low, and yet it's still really high because we're being pushed to be able to have a very consumer brand focused approach, right? So even though you can get in front of a lot more people, it becomes a lot more difficult to close the sale because of all the internet graveyards, right? And so the big idea these days is to really start to think about your business, not just in terms of creating product, but really like a media company, right? And so as you have your product development business, as you have your, focusing on sales and how you're merchandising, the other big idea here is how do we create conversations that are getting in front of the consumer and publishing content, even if your products were free. If your product was valued at nothing, what would your customer be getting away from that, right? And so that's important. And so, it takes about 6 different customer touch points in order to get someone to become brand loyal, in order to get them to convert. The consumers are online 7 hours a day, however, and that includes, mobile as well as being in front of your computer. But that does leave us, guys, with a whole lot of other hours of the day where people are not in front of their computers. Right? And so much is being focused on digital consumption and digital marketing, and yet a consumer-centric approach, I think, really stands in this basis of how do we get in front of the customer everywhere that they are, right? So not just getting in front of them digitally, because we all know tracking someone online with a bunch of cookies and chasing them around with advertisements kind of sucks. It's like, it works, but it's also, it's like, do we only want to rely on running around people on the internet? Probably not. And then what's also interesting is from an e-commerce standpoint, as you guys are probably, maybe on your second businesses, maybe on your first business. If it's your first business, it may not be your last business. Oftentimes we're littered with this, e-commerce graveyard. Right? It becomes so easy, and I do it all the time, right? You have a couple glasses of wine, you buy 10 websites, you're like, oh, I have this idea, and maybe this will turn into something, and maybe it won't. And at the end of the day, I think it's really about the intentionality, because there are so many places where people can go to buy things, and it's so easy, right? And I really blame Shopify and the tech industry for this. They made it seem as if having an MVP was kind of all that you needed, right? Build something basic, push it to market, but really, unless you're providing something that is a new utility, unless you're providing something that works functionally very different, it would be expected that your sweater probably had 2 arms, right? Or like it would be expected that your pants had 2 legs, right? So it's not enough, I think, to just have this concept of pushing this MVP out, right? So today we're going to talk about investing in the right kinds of content, picking KPIs, planning long-term. Certainly, I'd love for this to be collaborative. So if you guys, have questions, want to share things that are working for you, or et cetera, I'm sure you guys spend a lot of time with each other. So I'll use this as an opportunity to kind of learn also, I think. But I would love to kind of hear what your ideas and kind of thoughts are around this. So these days, like I mentioned, we need about 6 different touch points. So the first is obviously your website. The second should be your newsletter, so how you're communicating with your customer on a regular basis. Almost everyone as a primary channel is probably on Instagram, paid and earned, I suggest, as being 2 other touch points. And then I like to keep open a 5th and 6th. Some people are really interested in connecting with consumers on Snapchat. Other people are interested in connecting with consumers on Pinterest, whatever other channels you're looking for. And then lastly, I think it's so important to have this kind of in real life strategy in terms of how consumers are going to touch and feel your stuff. Right? So as we think about those touch points, as you're building out your calendar for, let's say, 2018, and what you're looking at from right now is actually the best time to be doing 2018 planning. What I've been advising our clients to do is to really sit down and say, what are the biggest touch points that we want to do next year that we know are already successful for us? How do we improve on those? What are the in real life channels that we want to activate, whether that is a pop-up shop or a shop-in-shop, whatever that is, let's calendar that in. And then what are the other channels we want to explore? And I think experimentation is one of those things that when we're so budget conscious or we're worried about allocating funds, we forget that if we don't experiment with how we're doing our marketing, that we actually end up missing out on key opportunities to be there first, right? And so when we think about being there first, it's like, how do we get somewhere before everyone else gets there, right? How can we invest a little bit of our time to test something out to see if it's even worth it? And if it's not worth it, what did we learn from that, right? There's always got to be some kind of key learning or something that comes out of it, right? But the experimentation phase, I think, is just so valuable. And so for next year, as you guys are improving on the things that already work, definitely think about some areas that are new and exciting, and maybe we'll take a little bit more budget and planning and timing, but have the possibility to kind of get in front of your customer in a way they haven't been spoken to before. One brand that I love is like what Kuyana's been doing with their direct mailers. It used to be that we would get these big catalogs from Restoration Hardware, or we'd get all these big catalogs in the mail. That went away for a number of years. Now we're starting to see a resurgence of print media and how people are experiencing content, right? Experimental, right? Definitely costs money to activate, but could be something worthwhile to integrate. Okay, so consumer-centric, right? So what exactly am I defining by consumer-centric? So certainly it's talking with your customers, not to your customers. Advertising these days that just push a customer to buy a product tend to not be performing as well as advertisements that are helping to satisfy a need in your customer's life. So one group of advertising we did that was really successful was one of our clients was, we were selling these dresses, and we basically said, we've party tested these dresses for 72 hours and they were wrinkle-free, right? As opposed to saying, buy this black dress right now, right? Or buy this at a coupon, right? Or buy it at a discount. And so we're finding that, yes, having things on sale, being able to showcase product to your customer is important. Carousel ads can kind of achieve that. However, being able to contextually speak with your customer and engage in dialogue with them is one way of showing you understand who they are.
I have a good question.
Yes.
You were supposed to a bad question.
A quick. It was what I said. You just touched base on Kuyana.
Yes.
Kuyana has been fantastic on putting their message on social media and just touching base with their customer. However, if you look at it, they are just a bunch of pretty girls with products. Yeah. And you talk about the customer generated content, there's not a lot. It's like Kuyana is highly manicured.
Yes. Yeah, so these are different ways of approaching customer-centric strategy. But yes, you're absolutely right.
What is? I guess my question, because their value proposition is just like, okay, I give you something that you really want, that is really simple, and you are going to want to wear all the time, type of thing. But what is so great about just
manufactured desire? Right? So when you think about manufacturing desire, you're selling the feeling, which is more important than selling the product, right? So when you think about satisfying a needs, right? So Kuyana is satisfying an emotional connection to want to have an understanding of where your products are made, right? Or understanding a certain lifestyle that for a customer is aspirational, right? So when we think about what consumers are looking for, can be a lot of different things, right? It's like being consumer-centric means giving them a thing, a feeling, something that they want to attach themselves to, right? Something they want to experience. So as opposed to saying, buy this product now, it's more come and experience this lifestyle, right? Like wearing our products will help you feel like you're embracing and living a lifestyle.
But isn't that what all brands do?
Not necessarily. So when you
Or
think
like
of
all the direct-to-consumer brands?
yeah, so when you think about a lot of different functionalities of direct-to-consumer brands, so some are doing pure product play, right? So it's more in terms of, buy this product at this price point. And so a lot of the content that they're producing is not just manufactured, but sometimes it's overly generalized, right? So they're not necessarily speaking to a particular person, right? So oftentimes sometimes what will happen is you'll see a direct-to-consumer brand that is trying to speak to too many people at once, right? So the content ends up being overly generalized, right? It's saying you can satisfy, this product is gonna fit like this, for example, right? Like using very general kinds of marketing points to communicate. Right? You can see this happening all the time when you look at someone's product copy, right? When they're using product copy that is like really basic and that's not getting to the point of what their customers want to see. Now, in some consumer-centric brands, their customers are looking for utility, right? So they're not looking for flowery or emotional copy. And that speaks to that brand, right? And speaks to that consumer. In other cases, they're looking for things that are a little bit more specific and nuanced and kind of emotional based. So I don't think, yes, I would say all direct-to-consumer brands should be doing that. Absolutely. But do I think they're all achieving that? Absolutely not. I definitely see brands that are trying to do a fail sweep of things, right? They're saying, let me target when I do my advertising, let me target when I'm doing my Instagram, very generalized ways of approaching the content, right? Or more generalized ways of approaching the consumer. So maybe you're already doing it.
I'm actually more interested about the food journey
Yeah,
thing
of
because
course.
it has been amazing, but what
Yeah.
they put out there is not that interesting, maybe because I'm not their target customer.
Yeah.
But, it's just not super, it's like, oh, the perfect toad. All right.
How do you spell the brand name? I don't know.
Cuyana.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like, terrible name.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I definitely spelled it with a Q.
They
Totally.
launched off the idea of just like simplicity and less is more, and that was like their big play.
Yeah, so but they also launched, they had their signature like Panama hat, right? It was like everything kind of came out of, bringing this like these simple pleasures, but also having a very simple model of like less and simplicity, but also connection, right? It was like, what does this Panama hat represent, right? And it's like, yeah, they totally bullshitted and expounded upon something that may not necessarily be authentic, right? In terms of like having integrity. And who's to say that that may not have consequences long term, right? But I think the interesting thing about the brand, I think, is their return to print marketing. That is what I think is interesting. What I think is interesting is that they are approaching customers in a way that most brands are not thinking about, right? So when you think about capturing someone's attention, or you think about this notion of, attention arbitrage, right? Like, how do I get to be in front of my customers in the way that's going to capture their eyes for a longer period of time? That I think is interesting because that allows you to have a catalog or have a product that sits around in a house, right? That allows you to have a longer opportunity to experience what they're showing, right? So that is what I think is interesting. As far as like the longevity of their integrity behind the brand, that I don't know.
No, I was
Yeah.
just talking about
Yeah,
the
of
short
course,
term,
of course.
as you were
Yeah,
saying.
absolutely. And I think that there are many different ways of kind of thinking about your utility, right? In terms of how your brand plays a focus. And so, for example, Warby Parker, of course, does a lot of consumer-generated content that's being reused on their blog, right? So they will, take hashtags that people target, Warby Parker Blue, and they'll reuse that content to kind of create that connection. And there are lots of different ways that you can kind of approach that. And some brands, I think, that are doing it well are splicing content and not making it so cohesive, right? They're kind of breaking up the mold of being able to show content that is both on brand and that is both lifestyle oriented, but also can show aspirational images or use of their consumers or the influencers that they're working with that also connect to their consumer. Okay, so other things that I think about consumer-centric, I think it is talking with them. I think it's also after sale. And so I think part of the time when we think about, the consumer-centric marketing strategy, we will think about pushing the product, selling the product, how we get the product to the customer, everything that goes into the packaging when we send the product to the customer. All of that is really thought out, and then yet what happens after they get the product, sometimes we forget about that, right? So part of consumer centricity is understanding how you're connecting with them post-sale, and even probably programming into your, let's say, your sales funnel, whatever you have set up in terms of, order tracking, whatever your post-sale emails look like, whether that is a email, whether that is a text message, whether it's a phone call. There are easy ways of implementing now text messaging. There's a company called Twilio, Twill or double Lio, and it makes it really easy. I mean, it's a tech platform, so you'll need someone to kind of build you your model to use it. But it's a great way in terms of doing aftercare sales, right? And kind of connecting and making sure. A lot of smaller brands are using it now, like the Greats are using it. A lot of small companies are starting to activate on mobile in these really small ways, not only by announcing, product launches, but also by talking about things that go on sale, asking you how your day was, things like that are really soft and not super sellable, but kind of keep the brand in the forefront of your mind. And so I guess consumer centricity, or moving towards that model, kind of means getting a little bit more scrappy in terms of how you think about the different ways you can get inside of the brain of your customer. Yes?
Just from a logistical perspective, as we start to invade people's cell phones.
Yes.
What is there from a legal perspective, similar to a website when you opt into an email list, right?
Yes, of course. So
how does that play out?
Yeah, so you're gonna have to ask, there's gonna be to add a button to your, let's say, sign up form, right? So when they're checking out, that allows you to contact them. Right, so they're gonna have to know that there might be some, surcharges or rates that might apply, in very small fine print, on that checkout form, right?
It's literally just an opt-in.
It's an opt-in. It's an opt-in, similar to your newsletter opt-in. So most time people, forget, or they don't necessarily have that opt-in form, the opt-in button on their checkout forms. You definitely want to do that. And you can also think about, even on your newsletter acquisition page, you can think about having, you can even A/B split test this, having phone number instead of, email acquisition, and see if people are more likely to not want to get spammed emails, right? But want to get, a periodic text update on when new products arrive. Right, so that could be an interesting way to just start to test and see how the consumer is responding to it. Usually if you have 2 form fields on a sign up, people are gonna only opt for one, right? So you gotta I would say pick which one, and maybe you can even run a split test for a month and see who ends up signing up for it. But I think mobile is fantastic. As you guys start to do more things in, if you guys are doing any things inside of other retail stores or activating inside of other retail stores, it's really interesting, especially if those brands are using any type of mobile, to be able to try to synchronize what you're doing with them, because more retailers are starting to adopt that, right? So when you think about, if you do a shop in shop or any type of in-store events, being able to leverage maybe a mobile campaign with that, so you can get people to RSVP with the text message, right? And kind of start from there. Yeah.
And people are, the data is saying that people will actually opt into a text message?
Yes.
That blows my mind.
Yes.
Yeah, customers they want to be your BFFs. It's annoying sometimes.
But for me, that a text message from a brand feels very invasive, and I don't know if that's an age thing, if that.
Well, it wouldn't be from the brand. It would be hey, I'm Evelyn from so and so, and I'm the
right. So
it's
brand.
Totally. So that's kind of a we're in too deep type of thing, right? It's it's almost are any of you guys using like the Echo, like Alexa, or okay. So neither am I. But literally the other day I was like, maybe I should try this. Right. Yeah.
It's cool.
I was like,
seen it in
I was like,
motion.
maybe I should try. Right. So I went from being like really like offended by it and offended by the whole idea of like that whole thing to going, oh, maybe that'll help me, you know, maybe the Amazon Prime button that'll help me reorder my, you know, what is that button? It's like the
Dash button.
yes, I was like, maybe that has utility, right? So there is a curve, right? And it's like, and so the way that people are adopting, you know, the uses of mobile and any of these other ways of communicating in general, I think are happening rapidly. And I think in the next like 5 years, I bet you'll be getting text messages from brands, you know?
Yeah, I don't doubt that I'm just wondering how people are responding to
Yes.
it.
I feel like it also depends on your like customer base. too.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
I feel like it could, if your customer base is older, it might be seen as like invasive, offensive. I don't know. And like the younger people are just like, yes, please, like bother. me,
Yeah, I
like,
mean, it's-
every moment.
Totally, and also, I mean, depending on who you guys are targeting, like your demographics, I mean, you know, I was looking at I think it was like the WGSN like consumer reports for like 2018 and 2019, and it was just all about how it's, you know, the transparency, the intimacy, the communication between CEOs of companies, small and large, and talking to their consumers. Right, and so imagine, so as like we start shifting more into individualized like consumer experiences that we want, like as consumers we're so high maintenance, you know, or like, oh, I want this now and I want this in my size, I don't want to wait, it's all very highly customizable, right? So individualistic that we are also going to want to feel as if we are getting individualized communication, right? Just as this kind of shopping experience is evolving.
Can I share one example?
Yes.
Because Nordstrom personal shoppers have been using SMS for a long time.
Yes.
When something new comes in, they'll shoot over a picture and say, hey, saw this, thought of you, can I put your size aside? And it's very...
And Matches Fashion actually also recently launched something about, I want to say it was like 6 months ago at this point. And it's so funny because it's like, you know, customer service, but they called it like, you know, your stylist, right? And it's like, oh great, you know, it's like, again, it's like reframing these very basic things that we used to do like 10 years ago, right? Customer service phone number. But what they did is it was for people who had accounts, and they would take a look at, you get on the phone, ask what you're looking for, and they would actually, you know, all right, that's great, you get off the phone with them, they would go online, look for all the things that you were looking for, filter them, add them to your basket, so the next time you went onto your account, all the things were there that you were looking to buy.
What is this company?
Matchesfashion.com. Yeah, amazing. Matches also has the most amazing packaging. So they have amazing packaging. But yeah, so I mean, there's this kind of weird, return to using older technologies, if we will, or user marketing strategies, and then also integration of the cell phone text messaging that sales associates used to use for a while, right? But now we're able to scale these things, right? So I think now it's like you have chatbots, and you have ways of kind of integrating very consumer-centric, personalized experiences. But the problem with things like chatbots are that you still need to, if you're targeting anyone who's Gen X or Gen Z, it's like you're targeting people who know that there's a robot on the other side, right? It's like maybe our parents would be like, oh, okay, I got my one question answered, but it's like we all kind of know more than that, right? Like we know that there needs to be someone who's kind of managing that, right? So those are kinds of the problems that kind of occur with these kinds of technologies. Is really the bandwidth and the personalization to be able to sustain that on the back end, right? Which is why for a small business you can't launch with everything, right? You kind of have to pick a few channels or a few things that work or test, right? Okay, so a lot of the things when it comes to this approach, as far as and I just want to get your guys' room temperature here, but from content management and content development, do you guys all operate with content calendars and budgets and timelines and how you guys see the life cycles of your content planning? Yeah? Okay, so let me just ask you a couple questions then. So are you guys planning, as far as like your content planning, how many channels do you guys plan content for?
Like 3 or 4 probably. Like, but not like repurposing the same content in different ways across different channels.
Okay, and so when you're doing your content creation, how often are you guys doing new photo shoots or doing new kinds of content production?
I would say like, well, it depends for which channel. For Instagram, it's much more like kind of, what is it, spontaneous. So
Mhm.
you are content creating probably weekly or every 2 weeks. I mean, we plan it weekly, you know.
So like doing like little photo shoots or doing like,
Well,
you know.
Photo shoots.
There you
Like
go.
taking a photo.
I think like as a small business, you're pretty much, my experience that we've had is like your photo shoot is happening. There's not necessarily a separate photo shoot for content, right? Other than photo shoot that happens for new product. Right?
Okay.
Because I was having a thought about that this morning. I was like, we really should be doing photo shoots for like styling and like things
Uh-huh.
like that for new content. But then because it's photo shoots are really expensive, those content generation photo shoots outside of product doesn't really happen. Like I would like it to happen more, but it doesn't.
Mm.
One of the ways we get around it though is we
Customer
have
generated
customer
content.
generated, right?
Yeah.
So we'll give a free shirt to someone and say, you know, if you get this shirt, because primarily we make shirts, and have like a friend that's a professional photographer or whatever.
Mhm.
I mean, we're identifying like influencers and that kind of stuff. They create 4 or 5 photos for us, and then we use that as a blog post and then push out like one of them on our Instagram
Mhm.
channel, so that like it's actually also, because obviously we're aligning with people that speak to our brand and that kind of stuff, and then we can
Sure.
speak a little bit about that person and who they are on the blog, and it allows us to not have to constantly do photo shoots, and it's a good way
Sure.
to not spend a lot of money doing it.
Yeah, which I think is really smart. You know, I think that the necessity of creating, you know, produced content, right, and kind of the content outside of lookbooks, right, or the content outside of, you know, changing your homepage every month, right, or changing your homepage every 2 weeks, is really important. You know, and the ways in which we've been finding, you know, the brands we're working with to be most successful is by doing a lot of collaborative photography, right? Are you guys all doing that also on a regular basis?
When you say define collaborative.
Like, you know, partnering up with, you know, let's say other brands, partnering up with other, you know, let's say smaller photographers, right? Kind of leveraging, as opposed to creating high budget, you know, shoots that you would produce for your collection drops, but let's say having that, but taking that budget, putting it in, let's say quarters or halves, and being able to then produce content more regularly with a smaller amount of money. You know, and so what we're finding is, as far as content planning is concerned, that taking a budget and kind of looking at your ad spend for last year, kind of taking a look at how you want to be investing, right, your photography and your content planning for the year coming up. What's important is to kind of think about your overall general marketing budget, right, and to take your marketing budget and realize what of that marketing budget is content production budget, what of that is your ad spend budget that's for digital, what of that is your ad spend budget for, let's say, in real life, right? And start thinking about your content, not just in terms of these kind of grassroots things that we can do on the fly, but also more in terms of orchestrated campaigns that you're producing, micro campaigns, if you will, that connect around consumer themes and content and things that you know your customers are interested in, right? So kind of picking up on themes and almost thinking as if you were them, right? Like if you were your customer, what are the things that, you know, you would want to see your product be involved in, right? Or what are the, you know, and not necessarily you selling your product at an event always, but your product and you guys being at your event, you know, and being able to incorporate the lifestyle, I think, in a way that's more campaign driven. So what we've been doing is kind of looking at the, you know, number of campaigns we want to do, breaking it down into the major drops of the collections, obviously all of the e-commerce and all of the kind of basic digital assets, but then starting to look at what are the smaller campaigns and themes and events and things that are happening during the year that we want to make sure we have well curated content behind, right? And what are the things that we can kind of plan in advance so we don't end up in a content rut, you know, where it's like, oh shit, I gotta like do something, right? And kind of avoid that kind of thing. And then also like, what is the comfortable spend per month?
That sounds awesome, but
Yeah.
that's a full-time job.
Yes, so if you can,
Sorry, it sounds amazing.
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
But it is, especially, it's just how can we bring it home to like a smaller.
Yeah, so when you have downtime in your business, right? So when you think about the cycles of, you know, you have your production cycles, you have your selling cycles, and then obviously you have ongoing marketing. So oftentimes, if you're not dealing with something operational or whatnot, at least from my experience, it's not on a daily basis that you're dealing with every single thing all at once, right? Sometimes there's a month or two here or there where you can sit down and plan your strategy, or you can plan at least what you want, let's say, the next 6 months to look like, even top level, right? And sometimes things come really from a top level thought process and then breaking them down and thinking about how you can execute them bottoms up, right? So it's not about necessarily, doing this every day, but more about sometimes thinking it in terms of batching, right? So like, how can I forecast and batch content and plan for it in advance to allow for me to do other things, right? And so it's interesting, like, you know, so we have for example, a YouTube channel, and we produce content, we produce 2 videos a month, but everything gets batched, right? But the content themes and the topics are planned around key ideas and themes during the year, right? So even though it's not necessarily, and we supplement that with things that are ad hoc, right? But at least from a top level standpoint, there's communication that's coming out that we know our customers are gonna relate to and that's relevant to them, right? And so you can also plan that not just, again, in terms of the, collection drops, but other key things that are important for you or for your brand or for your customer. And then of course, you know, the in real life channels that I think are as important. So as you guys are thinking about what the, key events are, what's happening to your customers right now, you know, how you will engage with the customers after you publish the content. You're right. Content management is like, it's a big deal. But as a business that is selling something, you've signed up to become a media company. Like as a business that wants to exist, right? You kind of sign up to take on the responsibilities of communicating with your customer in the ways that they need to, right? Otherwise, how do we create the noise for them to find you? I think one way of offsetting how we do things is thinking about who we collaborate with. Thank you, Celeste. Is really thinking about who the key partners are that we can, share resources with. I know you guys all here possibly share photographers or, other kinds of resources. But thinking about resource pooling, I think, is another really smart way of being able to get things done. And then also kind of thinking about the conversations that you guys get involved in with your customers and the ones that you don't. So what happened a lot during the last election were many of our clients, thank you so much, many of our clients were like, how proactive do we get politically? Right? Like, is that a conversation that we want to stand behind? Even now, it's a question, right? Like, how political do we want our content to be? How do we want to, speak about that? And so that really comes down to, does it matter how much does this matter to you as a brand? And really, how much does this matter to your consumer? And it can vary, right? It's like, right now, depending on what your demographic, a lot of the younger consumers want to hear some connection between their core values and beliefs. Right, so talking about one of our clients, Sugar High Love Stoned, is all their t-shirts are like super fun and 70s and really like, just really political stuff, and their customers love it. It's like, they wouldn't be who they were without, pivoting or kind of making a stand and saying these things and speaking about their core values. And so I think that the onus as far as the conversations and what you want to get involved in are really to do with what's important to your brand, but also kind of defining that, how do we want to talk about these things so that when things come up or when you're wondering, do we say this or not say this, you have, the guidelines to know what's touchable or kind of untouchable. And then lastly, I think in terms of like campaign ideation, again, stepping away from just product-centric photography, I think we want to think about the feelings that we're communicating, right? Again, kind of moving outside of selling a product, but if that product was free, this image, this campaign, the way the consumer is interacting with our website, how are they feeling about that, And oftentimes what you'll find with startups, so companies that are within the first, let's say, 3 years of getting started, is, they have a price point that's at one level. They have a website that does not match with their brand, right? They don't have a consumer experience that matches with the feelings and with the communication that they want to be giving. And so you get a disconnect between the perceived value of the brand and then actually what the brand is trying to achieve. And so sometimes when we think about user experience or how we want to develop things, we kind of think about, we need to have like a brighter button here, or, it's like, especially if you're bootstrapping, like how do we make this look good? But really the question is, how easy is it to find things? How do I feel when I'm engaging with this website or when I'm reading this content? And oftentimes that can be a big distinction between something that is elevated and kind of on point with what your consumers want versus something that maybe just has a lot of graphics or is like, just super eye-catching and, and whatnot. But the perceived value, I think, is really one of the biggest elements that comes to this content creation and speaking to your consumers. Because there is a way to look funded without having millions of dollars to fund your business, right? And sometimes it's more about the thoughts and the feelings about what you're communicating rather than the amount of money you're spending to produce it, right? And so I think that helps you choose, the nuances and whatnot. But I think that's, really important. So, okay, so some of this stuff is a little bit more like logistical, so I can kind of skip over that. But, campaign creation, so kind of the different, how long is our content lasting? What are the touch points? Making sure that everything you're created, even verbally or emotionally, has a call to action to it. So even if you guys are reposting stuff on the blog, whatever platforms, what is it you want that person to do or feel from that piece of content? Right, and sometimes, again, it's kind of taking that extra lens of just looking at something and giving it a little bit of a gut check, and then really organizing the kinds of content that you guys are using. Okay, so tracking KPIs, right? So obviously, the things that we normally track when we look at KPIs are the number of followers and then like basic engagement metrics. But the thing is, really understanding, I think, across your channels, are there consistent people who are engaging with your stuff all the time? Like, do you have these super users and people who are always commenting on your stuff, right? Not necessarily liking it, but who are these people, right? And what's kind of going into their lives? And this will kind of help you start to get an understanding of what's important to them and possibly things that your brand might find to be important to kind of talk about. And then obviously conversion. And then when we think about the tracking KPIs and the paid, and then some, the connection KPIs that we're looking for, we really want to start to understand, and this is the real kind of consumer centricity KPI part, is how long is this customer been with us, right? As a early stage brand, how often is the customer purchasing from us? How often is it built into our model and our merchandising strategy that they would buy from us, right? So if we're working off business models that leave us with collections that drop twice a year, then, is half of our cohort and consumer base going to be people who, buy from us at the beginning of the season, and then the other half are people who are waiting for it to go on markdowns? If we are driving collection drops every month, then are we expecting our consumers to be buying something from us at least 2 to 3 times a year, right? How can we start to drive the consumer's shopping behavior to kind of mimic, right, to understand who they are and speak to them based on how often we are releasing new products and trying to activate and engage with them? Early repeat rate, right? So are they buying from us frequently in the beginning? The long-term frequency, again, once or twice a year, is it once a year? And sometimes that's often just embedded in the nature of your business model, right? But that would give you a pretty good idea of what your expectations of your customers are. So when you look at a basket, when someone's checking out of their cart, right, you need to ask yourself, well, was the intent, did I have enough triggers? Was the intent for them to buy a few types of products? Did I have the right kind of call to actions for that? Or is it really intended for them to buy one, and our business model is such that they, will buy one and they won't need another one for the rest of their lives, And we want to do something that's simple and basic, and it's the best XYZ, and and that's it. And then maybe you upsell them or work with them on after sale and care for the product. And there are all these other ways you can kind of get the customer to come back to you beyond just the sale, but understanding your model and how to build your marketing activities around that, I think, is really important. Okay, so who is driving this is my schedule. Who is driving the emotional, my schedule is kind of crazy. Who is driving the emotional connection? And so when we think about the emotional connection between the brand, right? So for many of you guys who are, the only CEOs of your company, co-founders, trying to figure out how to pull the lever on, everything else that you're doing, someone, and whether that's yourself and that's 30 minutes kind of once a week, steps back and says, what exactly are we communicating here in terms of how we want someone to feel about all the assets that we're putting out there, right? And I know it kind of touches on things that feel a little bit, touchy-feely, but that's kind of where the consumer market is headed, It's like leveraging basic analytics, Google Analytics, Facebook Analytics, and adding that certain other layer and level of 360-degree cohesiveness with the feelings aspect of it is what's driving your consumers to be with you longer. Like, I'm sure consumers love knowing that you're showing their content. It creates something that makes them feel like they're connected. And there are other ways of doing that, right? The in real life ways that can translate is obviously, hosting a consumer appreciation party, and call it something much sexier than that, but it's like, something that kind of activates and creates a space for them to be the biggest brand advocate for your business, right? And oftentimes it's investing in channels that may not have an immediate, ROI in terms of a financial payoff, because you don't know which one of these 6 channels that you are leveraging is the ultimate thing that gets them to buy. Right? So nowadays what you hear about when you do things like, Google, SEM and other platforms is, not just what is the earned, like what is the money you've actually earned from, these advertisements, but also, what are we thinking by virtue of tracking them through cookies and other things? What are the other ways in which we're able to see, like, how long did it take for them to come back? And like, did we plant something in their brain that eventually got them to buy it? And so you're able to now kind of track more sophisticated analytics on what they think the projected spend was. But ultimately, when you have these 6 different touch points, it could be that they went to your website 5 times before they followed you on Instagram and then saw that you had an advertisement and then bought something, right? So that kind of high-level sophisticated tracking between all of the channels is important, and I'm sure will be available to smaller business owners eventually. But I think is important. And until then, I think the emotional connection can really help to drive that. So I threw in here just kind of one of the things that we did for the UN project. I wanted to talk to you guys about it because it was so interesting about how we ended up launching what they wanted to achieve. But then I know we only have a few more minutes, so I want to kind of quickly pull up the, so this is a really interesting slide. So when we put together like our content planning strategies, we break down all of the different channels that we are working with a website or with a brand, right? And so reason why I think this could be really useful to kind of go through is it's a really succinct way, and certainly you can kind of bootstrap and kind of create something like this for your business if it's useful. But it's taking a look at your top line sales goals and then really starting to drive down into how everything else is supporting each other, right? So sometimes we think about marketing and kind of sales as being, obviously we want marketing to drive sales, but when we're planning them, sometimes we can plan them a bit mutually exclusive from each other, but really they are very much synergistic, right? So this content planning is what we enacted when we did our United Nations project. And this project was to launch a brand that was a collective group of artisans in Nepal who were private label manufacturers and who were selling some of their own brand, but they wanted to launch the US and Japanese markets, right? And they wanted to be able to get their product in front of buyers, in front of retailers, but also in front of brands, right? Because they wanted to be able to highlight what they were doing through private label, right? And what they could offer. Now, it's a group of 60 different artisans, so aligning on voice and messaging and being able to kind of publish one thing was very difficult. But what was so cool, what we ended up doing is we went through the entire content planning process, but we started off by saying, what is the long-term strategy and what is the long-term vision for this company, right? At the end of the day, let's say in 5 years' time, what is it that we want the business model to look like, and what are the revenue streams that we're kind of building upon right now? We use that as our benchmark to then figure out what the right strategy was to approach those customers, right? We end up doing a combination of A/B split testing, ads to the Japanese and US market, but then also doing really fun things on Instagram, right? So we ended up doing a lot of direct messaging, right? We had an intern who was full-time on our Instagram channel that was going through and finding brands, right? And finding other types of potential buyers of the product and going through and just starting to introduce the brand to them, right? And starting to go through and share with them, what we had going on, a little bit of story behind what we're doing. When we saw that people were traveling to, Nepal, you can kind of see on a geolocator on Instagram where people are traveling to, we would hit them up over direct message and be like, hey, you should come by and visit our, our collective, here's what we're doing. And what it did is it raised brand awareness. We were able to extract a lot of leads from it that they're now working to close, but we were able to kind of get into the customers in a way that wasn't just through hashtags and liking their content, because everyone's doing that, right? But still now, when you think about direct messaging, a lot of consumers right now are still, brands aren't really using it that much. It's a lot of like direct messaging between friends. It's a lot of direct messaging between, hey, did you see this post or that post? But direct messaging from a retail standpoint is really fascinating because people are checking and they're looking at it and it becomes a notification, right? So starting to think about other ways of communicating really ended up helping us when we were activating across all of these channels. I mean, we were able to get our reach on our advertisements to be quite low because we went through the process of, the cost on the reach to be low because we went through a process of looking at, the first step is brand awareness, then we were moving into reach, and then we moved into conversion, right? So depending on how you guys are orchestrating your communication with the consumers, again, and how you leverage that through these different, Facebook and Instagram channels, there are the organic ways, and direct message is definitely that. But then on the paid channels, on the paid side of that, starting to think about using advertisements that aren't necessarily just to get someone to click out of the ad, right? So right now on Facebook, of course, and all platforms, it's much cheaper to keep someone in a platform than it is to ask them to go away from the platform, right? And so when it comes to engaging and getting that customer involved through, let's say, for example, our Facebook strategy, the goal was not to get them to click out. The goal was to get them to become a fan, right? So our funnel became brand awareness, get our fans, activate our fans, right? Remarket to them, then get them through the page, right? Then get them to click out to the website, right? So sometimes, again, our desire to possibly shortcut these things, you know, I've worked with a lot of brands who just want to, you know, create the ads and say like, yes, let's push to buy, or buy now, or shop now. Yeah, I mean, in a vacuum, those would seem to make the most sense to be able to activate like that, but it's thinking a little bit more sophisticated through the customer funnel and their experience, and again, getting them to take smaller actions that then get them to take the bigger actions that I think are really important here. Does have any questions? I know obviously I've been talking for a long time. Yes.
Are you willing to share that deck so that we
Yes, I am.
Thank
Yes.
you so much. Sorry about that, John. I didn't mean to steal your
Sorry, I know it's really small. when I did the screenshot, it was really small.
But also you have an Excel document.
This is in Excel.
So maybe you want to can you share it?
Yes, I can share that. Yes, this is in Excel, certainly. Anything else, guys?
Do you have like any, like I feel like for content generation, it's really just always like coming up with like new original ways to like do the same thing like in many different ways, right? And I sometimes, the best inspiration is just like loads and loads of like examples of like ways people that have like done that. Is there like a...
So things that are, so when you think about like, I mean, it has to like resonate to, you know, what your brand is interested in, but okay, doing lots of like little like short videos as content is great, right? It's like the more short videos you can do. Brands that are doing things that are more shocking, you know, obviously I tend to get traction, but I haven't found yet like a single, you know, do this, and then it's kind of the ultimate, you know, mix of content. You know, unfortunately, I know that would be amazing. But I haven't yet found that perfect mix. You know, what I've found is, you know, there are different things that I've seen that are working that are more like unilateral, right? So, you know, brands that are really interested, like one of our other clients who, her bag line is called LZL. And so her whole thing is like, you know, kind of more gritty, more on the streets, you know, but it's juxtaposing, you know, a higher end product with something that is very unexpected, right? And so it's kind of thinking, I think, a little bit more along the lines of, you know, how can you push the boundaries of your own brand tenets, you know? Like, how do you push the boundaries of what your consumers are used to expecting from you, right? Because if you change up what they're used to expecting, I imagine then that would possibly garner their attention for a little bit longer. And the other night, it was really interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine and this other guy who worked at Instagram, and we were talking about how, you know, how Instagram is looking at its algorithm, and we were talking about how, you know, all like baby pictures, right? And people like liking a bunch of baby pictures, but how when you go into the Explorer part, oftentimes you'll see other pictures, and you know, like there's not necessarily a one-to-one correlation between the pictures that you're liking versus like the content that is being suggested to you, right? So what's interesting is like from a user standpoint, right? I don't know how, you know, we can get that data in terms of like how long someone is spending looking at the image, but I think there's an interesting correlation between, you know, the images that we're liking oftentimes aren't even images that we feel connected to, right? And so what I think is interesting is kind of using images, or even I think things like pinch and zoom. So a lot of brands that are doing, you know, now that you can zoom into Instagram images, doing like, you know, can you find this on here? And, you know, kind of creating some engaging content, I think that leverages some of the functionality in Instagram would be useful. But yeah, sorry.
Are you familiar with Project September?
No,
Oh.
tell me.
No, dude, I actually wanted to ask you questions about it. It was just founded last year by one of the girls from Guild, and it's basically literally an affiliate way of shopping through Instagram. But they are, I mean, I used it for a little bit, and right now their customer service is absolutely terrible. But basically you go and there's an Instagram feed and the products are featured with little dots.
Yeah.
And then they are run through link share and all this affiliate
Rocket
marketing
time.
programs.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when it comes to affiliate marketing, it is, and Shop Spring is also on affiliate, and, there are a lot of brands, there are a lot of companies that have launched trying to do affiliate marketing, or leveraging things on affiliate. From a margin standpoint, so basically.
And I did terrible when I did affiliate. It was horrible.
Yeah, well, of course. I think from a margin standpoint, when you think about affiliate platforms, even when you think about how influencers used to use affiliates and now no one, it's affiliate platforms, the onus is on the company who's creating this shopping system to provide a unique and real experience, right? And the problem with that is it takes a tremendous amount of marketing dollars, and the company itself only makes a small percentage of the sale, right? So from a scalability standpoint, a lot of affiliate businesses like Shop Spring, et cetera, struggle with scalability because the margins aren't even there for them, right? So the margins aren't there for them. They need to provide a utility and a service, and oftentimes it's connecting them with influencers. But how do you incentivize influencers to be a part of this affiliate program without paying them?
Oh, the way
right?
I did it, it's that it was terrible. It was through link share. And actually you pay for the usage of the platform, but the affiliates got a commission that you negotiated with them.
So it's usually 7 to 12%, right?
Yeah. But it definitely, and I didn't run it myself because I don't know enough to run it.
Sure.
It was very bad. So I just, I don't know why.
Running affiliate platforms on your own, doing affiliates, it's like the same thing as doing a brand ambassador. And unless you have a huge energy, unless you have a huge amount of energy and dollars to spend in activating a group of people who are going to sell your stuff, it is very difficult to organically launch affiliate, because in the past, bloggers and influencers leveraged affiliate platforms in order to get them sales. Now they know they can get paid, a few $100s to a few $1,000s in order to do something that they used to get paid, let's say, maybe a few $100s as a percentage, right? So they're getting paid up front in order to do something they used to get paid for if they sold something on the back end, right? The brands that are doing ambassadors or activating affiliates, the only way to get an affiliate to be activated is if you're targeting low-level influencers, right, or low-level people who are just getting started, and you're incentivizing them by creating a community for them, right? So they feel we're all in this, this team. But then you have another model, which is, companies like, India Hicks or, Ash and Ames, which are doing, real MLM models, right? Where they're buy our products and then resell them to the consumer. So when you think about getting other people to do the selling for you, or getting them to pitch it, it used to be an amazing opportunity to do affiliates and be on link share or reward style or one of those things. And now it's actually a lot more challenging to do that, right? And the smaller influencers are looking to do affiliate platforms with much bigger brands because they want to increase their perceived value, right? So they're gonna partner up with reward style or link share because they want to have access to the brands that are selling on that platform. So they can make it seem as if they're being sponsored by or working with, Tom Ford sunglasses or something, even though they have no affiliation. Right, so the whole affiliate thing is it's, I don't think it's as profitable. I think the idea of, activating groups of people to make them feel as if they are influencers or kind of making them feel that way is great in a vacuum, but you have to have a long-term vision of helping them build themselves, right, in order to help sell something, right? So it's it can be a lot of work, you know, with not necessarily that much payoff if that's not kind of where you want your business model to go. Sorry, that was a very long answer to a short.
Make sure you either have
Yeah,
time
no, of
for
course,
lunch or-
awesome.
Yeah, or
Yeah, or you know, I can after. Do you guys have other questions? Yeah.
Which one? Is there like a,
Mm.
do you have an app or a service that you find useful, it's pretty low cost, that there's so many different areas to get your KPIs